Okay. Yeah, 1 second here.
Okay.
Okay. Do you have it?
Yes.
Okay. Oh my gosh. This looks good.
Um, are, are you able to also email it to me?
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. Now
All
I
right.
get your email as well.
Okay, awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the last time we met, we were kind of talking about ideas for writing a book and stuff, and
Mm-hmm.
I thought this might be an interesting
Mm-hmm.
thing to read, just in terms of what we're talking about, like what do we write about, and
Yeah. Great. Yeah.
um,
Yeah, sort of interesting. I mean, when I started reading this book, in the first couple of chapters, I was really interested and I started reading quickly. And then
uh-huh.
from about chapters 4 through 8, it got really slow and kind of boring.
Yeah.
Um, but then after putting the outline together, it got interesting again because I just
Mm,
took out, the most to me important or the most interesting things from each of the chapters. It's a strange book in a way because the subject matter seems pretty technical, but it's not a technical book,
yeah.
but it's not particularly like poetic or anything either. So,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, I kind of like it though, for the following reason. Well, there are two reasons, I guess. I mean, one, assuming the historical account is all accurate, um,
Hmm.
it's nice to get an overview of, the this particular sort of logical function or, judgment, whatever you want to call it.
Hmm.
The other thing that I like about it though is that actually it's fairly minimal with respect to interpretation and maybe sort of wider application, and so it leaves some space for readers to kind of imagine different ways that they might apply or explore the idea. So it's kind of nice for that reason too.
Yeah. Yeah. I enjoyed like reading some of the more historical, like the translation from Greek to Arabic and stuff, and some of the challenges
Well, right,
encountered.
yeah,
And
yeah, that's interesting.
yeah.
Yeah, I don't really have any expertise whatsoever with Arabic, certainly not the language. I know a little bit about some of those philosophers, in particular Avicenna. I've spent some time reading, and
Mm,
Averroes too. Those are both. I don't remember what Averroes' Arabic name is. Avicenna's Arabic name is Ibn Sina. So
mm,
using the Latin names that
mm,
these
mm.
people come to be known by in Western Europe. But
Yeah.
um, yeah, it was certainly interesting. Well, maybe we can jump into the outline
Yeah.
because I don't know how far we can even get. How much time do we have today?
I have like about an hour and 45,
Okay, okay.
an
So let's
hour
do like
and a half. Yeah.
okay. Let's stop before 9:30 then.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. How far did you get? I did see that you highlighted things in later chapters that I haven't read yet. So have you read the whole book or did you just read?
Oh, I sent you. Yeah, I kind of like skipped around. I got the same thing. I got kind of bored, like somewhere in the middle. So I skipped to like Kant and like Fichte and stuff. And
Hmm. Hmm.
but I kind of went back to the first few chapters, and I think I'd missed a lot when I
Yeah,
did my first reading. So.
Yeah, okay, well that's good. I think it would be nice to just get through some of this and then I am also more interested in Kant through I think he talks about Adorno a little bit later on. Um
Yeah.
kind of looked quickly through some of those chapters. That is generally more interesting for me too. But I think it's nice to draw out some of the things from ancient and medieval philosophy with respect.
Mm,
I guess we need a name for the thing that this book is about. There are sort of two different names. There's indefinite naming, infinite naming, but then
hmm
naming turns into judgment. And then I suppose once you get to Adorno, it has even a new name there too, the non-identical, right?
Right.
The assertion of a negation or the assertion of an absence or something like that.
hmm
Whatever the name is, I guess we can call it infinite names for now because that seems most general, perhaps.
Yeah.
Anyway, so how do you want to do this? You want to just go chapter by chapter, or were there certain things that popped out? I also added a few things which are kind of interesting to look at. Really, the only
Yeah.
chapter that I added stuff was in chapter 3 in the square of opposition.
hmm
Um,
Oh, there's some stuff about cube. Okay, this is just.
well, yeah, because the square of opposition, once you add in infinite names, once
Oh,
you're
right.
able to negate the subject, predicate, and copula, now you have 8 possible forms.
Mm,
So then you can
hmm
construct something like a cube. Although I suppose not every node in the cube would necessarily be connected by some kind of logical relationship as it is in the square. I'd have to think about that a little bit more uh,
Yeah.
and see if, for instance, what is the particular relationship between non-S is not non-P and
hmm
S is not non-P or even S
hmm
is P. I'm not sure what the relationship is. And in fact, actually, one of the things he says is that it's by no means clear what that even means.
Right.
I put that into just kind of a natural language sentence. Non-water is not non-stone, uh,
hmm
which, if it's true at all, it seems like I suppose you could have multiple divisions of the infinite complement of the original positive term. So what I mean there
hmm
is that you've got water, which is the original term in this sentence, the positive term, and then its
hmm
complement is non-water, or at least one of its
Right.
complements is non-water as a term. I suppose
Yep.
the sentence water is not or water is stone has multiple complements, right? It has water is not stone. It has non-water is stone. It has
hmm
water is non-stone, and so
Monstone.
on. But in any
hmm
case, if I'm saying non-water is not non-stone, seems like I have at least two divisions of the complement. I've got the complement of water and the complement of stone.
Right.
And then what I'm saying is that the complement of water, um, in one way or another, perhaps if it's a Venn diagram, it doesn't intersect with the complement of stone or something like
Mm.
that, perhaps, right? But
And they're both infinite at the same. Right.
well, they're both
Mm.
infinite. All three terms in this sentence have been infinitized,
Right.
right? Um, but the complement of water and the complement of stone not intersecting would mean that, I guess
Mm.
that makes sense. Let's see. Um, I guess what it would be, well, non-water is non-stone would mean that there's some shared complement of water and stone,
hmm
like that. But then to say that it's not means that whatever the complement of water and the complement of stone are do not intersect, I guess is what it would be saying. Something like that.
Yes. Right.
Um, I can't think of a situation in which that information would be useful, but maybe.
Yeah.
But in any case, yeah, what I've got here for the square of opposition chapter is something that he does sort of pass over this quickly, but he says it in a really confusing way. Because I think he says there are six further, say, propositional forms or logical forms
Hmm.
or whatever. But that number six is assuming the original two, S is P and S is not P. That's why
Hmm.
it's confusing the way he writes it. So it's better to just say it's eight. And of course it's eight because you've got two
Or
functions and then you've got three um, components of the sentence, right? And so it's just going to be two
hmm
to the third, which
hmm
means that you'll have eight. I mean, you could also just count it out.
Yeah.
Um, but then, so if you're going to try to synthesize that all into a diagram, then
hmm
you'd end up with a cube because you'll have eight
Yeah.
points that presumably can be connected in different ways. What happened to your camera?
Oh. Oh, okay. I was looking at the PDF. Sorry.
Oh, I see.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
Okay.
yeah, there's also one thing he kind of glosses over, which didn't make a lot of sense in that chapter, where he's talking about contradictories and contraries. You're
Hmm.
pretty familiar with the square of opposition, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So, contraries are the horizontal, well, the top horizontal line is the contrary and the
Hmm.
bottom one is the subcontrary, but that's one type of opposition. And then there's
Hmm.
a diagonal opposition between universal and opposite particular
Yep.
terms or forms. So that like all S is P contradicts some S is
Some
non-P,
S is not
or
P.
I'm
Right.
sorry, some S is not P, right?
Yeah.
And then one of the things he claims is that the contradictories presuppose the contraries. But
Right.
not enough, right?
Hmm.
So you would think about it in the following way. I guess what he's saying is there's a bivalence, right, between universal affirmative and universal negative because they can't both be true. It's one or
That's
the
the law of excluded middle.
other. The law of excluded middle. Well, no, the law of excluded middle means there can't be a third term, right? It's more like
Mm.
the law of non-contradiction, to say that you can't have both S and not S.
Uh-huh. Okay.
But the law of excluded middle is it's either S or non-S, and there's no other alternative.
Mm. Okay.
But in any case, bivalence just means if S is true, or if P is true, then non-P is false, or not P is
Yeah.
false, right? Or the negation of true is false, the negation of false is true, right? That's what bivalence refers to.
Hmm.
And so what he claims is that uh, is a rule that's presupposed in contradiction, in the contradictory line.
Hmm.
But that's not a sufficient analysis. Why not?
So, okay, so if every S is uh, P, then it must be true that all S is P, right? So that's what,
Well, that would be, yeah, subalternation. So the
uh-huh,
a true universal entails a true particular on the same side. So the true positive universal entails the true particular,
I see. Okay, so that's the
true
subalternation, right?
affirmative particular, and the true negative universal entails the true negative particular.
Yeah,
right? So you go down on the
that's the
square,
right.
and the bottom one is entailed in the truth of the top one.
Yes. Okay.
Um, but here's basically the problem, right? Okay, so what we want to know is why, if I have, say, uh, all S is P is true, if I have that, why does some S is not P have to be false?
Mm-hmm.
Because here's the thing, if it were just the contrary, um, then if I have all S is P, then I have to have no S is P, that's going to be
Mm-hmm.
false. But the problem is that
Mm-hmm.
the false negative universal doesn't entail the falsity of the negative particular. Because,
Yes.
right, okay, so like let's say that uh here's a sentence that might show this. Let's see. Okay. It is false that all dogs are Chihuahuas,
Mm-hmm.
and it's false that no dogs are Chihuahuas.
Mm.
Because some dogs are Chihuahuas and some dogs aren't. But it's not true that all dogs are and no dogs are.
Mm.
So in that case, you can have a false negative universal and still have a true particular unit or a true negative particular,
Particular. Right.
right? So
Mm-hmm.
then the thing is, if it's just the contrary, and I have, let's say that A is true. Um, okay, so it's true that the E, the negative universal, is going to be false, but the falsity of that doesn't mean that O, the negative particular, is going to be false,
Mm-hmm.
right? Because you can have a false negative universal and still have a true negative particular.
Right.
So then if you look at what I write here uh, in the,
Sorry. So when you say, just to go back, when you say a false negative, sorry.
are you good with the A, E, I, O? Because that's a lot
Yeah.
to keep track of then.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I, O. Okay, so if I
So, so when you say E,
have, mhm.
when you, and you said it's a false, um, negative universal, but isn't it true?
Isn't what true?
So like when you say no SSP,
Hmm.
yes, it is false, but it's also like a true, statement, right?
No, if I say no S is P is false, then no S
If
is
you say no S,
not
uh-huh,
true. So these are different assertions basically, right? All
uh-huh,
SSP and no SSP are different assertions.
yeah,
If no SSP is false, then its complement, all SSP will be true, but
right.
SSP is still false. It's not also true.
Mm, I see.
Yeah, right. And so what I'm saying is that, okay, what he says in this chapter is that um, the contradictory between say I and, or I'm sorry, A and O and E and I presupposes the contrary of the
Hmm.
horizontal line.
Yeah,
But then that's not enough because the problem is that you can still have uh, E is false and O is
right.
true.
Yes.
And then that would mean that why would you have, if you, let's say you have A is true, why is it that you have to have O is false,
Mm,
right? Because
hmm.
the only rule he has specified is um, what is it? Contrariety, contrariety,
Contrary. Yeah,
the top one, the top
yeah.
expression there. And so even with that, you could still have
Uh-huh.
O is true, even if E is false. So then you need another rule too,
Yes.
right? And then what did I write here? So that the contradictories presuppose bivalence, right? So that if true excludes false and false excludes true, and there's nothing in between, then the incompatibility, so that's the contrary of A and E, and the entailment
Hmm.
of the particular in the true universal. So let's see what I have here. If I've got A, then that entails that not E. And if I've got A, then that entails that I. And from that, you can then deduce that not E. And so you get
Hmm.
uh, the the contradictory that way. But you have to also have the subalternation of A implies
Mm.
I. And he doesn't mention that.
Hmm. Mm. Yeah.
So anyway,
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of technical, but
Yeah.
it was interesting. I mean, the thing about it, which is kind of interesting, I guess, his I think his main claim is that these logical forms are all interconnected, which is sort of obvious just looking at the diagram. But um, I suppose it's easy to just sort of memorize the different components or the different relationships or even the different functions in a square of opposition without really thinking about how the particular combination of all of them can, I suppose you can derive any node from the relationships between the others, I guess is what the
Hmm.
main point is. But you have to flesh out the other relationships too.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
his whole like reason, I mean, the reason he brought up the square of opposition was because like what was it? Oh, like it was an inquiry, Aristotle's inquiry to truth and falsity, right? That like names and verbs are only true when incorporated into a sentence and they're
Hmm.
in combination and stuff. And
Hmm.
so was that sort of like the lead up into, at least in the book, to the square of opposition?
Yeah, I don't remember exactly. Though he does say that, which is interesting because yeah, I mean, that's a fairly obvious idea, and yet for whatever
Mhm,
reason, uh, maybe I don't know Aristotle well enough. I didn't associate that particular formulation with him. It's something that, like,
mhm,
in the past, if somebody had asked me who formulates that assertion that a term on its own is meaningless, I'd probably say something like, or not meaningless, but it's not truth functional. Uh,
right.
I'd probably say, oh, Frege or Carnap or one of these people, but I guess
Yeah,
Aristotle got there
I
first,
see.
which isn't surprising because it's not a difficult concept to master. And so,
Yeah.
I mean, I think that people knew that thousands of years ago
Yeah,
too, but
yeah.
I didn't realize that Aristotle had written that down.
Mm,
Um, yeah, see if there's anything from the first sentence which is interesting. Oh, actually, there was something that's kind of nice to spell out about syllogistic logic from the first chapter,
mm,
which has to do with it's in my outline under constraints on syllogistic logic.
yes.
And it has to do with not only the commonality of terms, but the sort of bifunctionality of at least one term, or maybe, well, I'd have to think, does it? Well, I guess if you have like a syllogism that has more than three or more than two premises, then you would have multiple terms that would have the dual function potentially.
Yeah,
But in just
yeah,
a two premise syllogism, then one term is going to have two functions. Did
yeah.
you get that? That's
Yeah,
actually fairly significant.
the where the term can is neutral in terms of it being a subject and then a predicate, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
So like in my thing here, I've got all A is B, C is A. Well, in this case, A is functioning both in the subject and the predicate position,
Hmm.
right? Now, that means that certain terms are going to be excluded. Do you remember which terms are excluded from syllogistic logic for that reason?
The uh, copula? No, you need that, right? Wait, when you say terms, um,
Yeah. Here, the way I'm using terms just means what can stand in the S position and what can stand in the P position in terms of the material content of the proposition. So, like for instance, all dogs are mammals. Dogs and mammals are terms,
uh-huh.
right? So there are going to be certain terms that cannot function in a syllogism, or at least, yeah, I mean, one thing that Aristotle explicitly says is that syllogistic logic pertains to something like the middle ground of speech.
Oh, right. So the particular and the general.
Yeah, but spell that out a little bit. What types of terms cannot be employed in a syllogism? At least as respects this idea of the shared logical function of a single term.
Yeah. Um, so when I'm thinking of um, a general term, I mean, his example is like, I think he gives substance,
Well,
right?
I would
That
start the other way because it's a little easier to wrap your head around. Instead of starting with the absolutely general, I'd start with the absolutely particular.
particular, right? So I guess like Sandesh or something, or Socrates.
Yeah, yeah, proper names.
Yeah,
Exactly.
proper names, right? Yeah.
Terms that denote exactly one thing.
Hmm.
Um, and why can't they function in a syllogism in that particular way? Now, the thing to keep in mind is you could still have a syllogism that incorporates Sandesh.
Yeah,
All humans are mortal. Sandesh is a human, therefore Sandesh is mortal.
right.
But Sandesh can't be that common term,
Hmm.
right? You have to have a common term that has two functions between the major and the minor premise, right?
So when you say common term, you mean
Well, yeah,
yeah, right.
what I mean is, okay, in the three-line syllogism that I just said, all humans are mortal, Sandish is human. Those are my two premises.
Yeah.
Let's not worry about the conclusion. Um, Within those two premises, those two sentences, they each share one term. All humans are mortal, Sandish is human.
Right, human, right.
Human,
Hmm.
right,
Yeah.
exactly. So that's what I mean by the common term. But it's not just that it's common, it also has to change function between the two premises,
Yes. Yeah.
right? Um, and so then the problem
Mm.
is whatever the term is, it has to be able to both be sufficiently general to be the P term and sufficiently specific to be the S term. And
Yes, right.
absolutely specific terms aren't general enough to be the P term, and absolutely general terms aren't specific enough to be the S term.
Right. You cannot predicate Sandesh as a property of something.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
Right. So,
Yeah.
that's why Aristotle claims that substances are unique, or subjects. I don't remember actually now. I think it's anyway, like when he's asking what is there, as opposed to Plato, who thinks that what is ultimate are the forms. What Aristotle claims is that what is ultimate are substances, things that can accept contraries, right? And so
Hmm.
um, it's sort of the inverted picture of Plato's ontology, that Aristotle's starting with particulars of which you can predicate properties.
Yeah.
But then there are certain properties that are so general that um, they can't function in the subject term, and so then the example is typically something like substance or being or something like this, understood as a property that
Mm-hmm.
which inheres in everything
Mm-hmm.
is not specific enough to be a property, or not a property, but a subject.
Subject. Yeah.
So one way of looking at that is it makes a little bit more sense from the point of view of division. Substance or being or that which inheres in everything can be divided, but there's nothing higher. There's no higher level unity into which it can be subsumed. There's no
Yeah.
higher level unity that is divided such that you get being or substance,
Yeah.
right? And so for that reason, it's too general.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, so that's actually fairly significant and important to keep in mind. And
Yeah.
actually, that particular distinction is important for the medievals when it comes to infinitives or infinitization of terms, right? What
Mm-hmm.
happens when you make an absolutely general term, which they call transcendentals, transcendental terms or transcendental names,
Mm-hmm.
names like being, one, true, good, thing, something. What
Mm-hmm.
happens when you make those infinite, such that you say non-being or non-thing? Non-thing is
Mm-hmm.
good because grammatically it seems like a noun, whereas being is a gerund, and so it seems still too verby. But
Yeah.
non-thing, okay, so what kind of thing is a non-thing? Oh,
Right.
paradox, right? And so, the reason that you get that paradox is that I suppose one way of looking at it is you've got sort of two competing ideas of infinity, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you've got the transcendental understanding of infinity, which means that which positively inheres in everything. And you've got
Yeah.
the negative infinity, which is the complement of that, but there is no
Yeah.
complement of that, right?
Yeah.
Or it's not even that straightforward because well, maybe we can look at the argument in more detail, but it's not even that straightforward to say that there is no complement of say a transcendental term. It has to do with a premise that is taken as axiomatic in scholastic philosophy, what's known as existential import. But let's wait on that. Let's maybe
Mm.
jump through a few more things here. But in any
Yeah.
case, one thing that's clear is that um, not only are there different sorts of opposition, it's not just that S is P is opposed by S is not P, but every term or all terms in any of those sentences can be uh, negated or infinitized or whatever. But also
Yeah.
with respect to what we mean by infinity, there are sort of
Mm-hmm.
different competing spheres or different competing pictures.
Yeah.
Let's see. So in chapter 4, there's maybe something kind of interesting, which has to do with different things that the negation operation can mean.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe a better way to say that is what are the aptness conditions under which these um, interpretations of negation make sense?
Yeah.
So, he's got negation, privation, and then indefiniteness. Do you remember any of this stuff?
So, yeah, negation is just, just a normal S is P and S is not P, where the predicate does not can is not affirmed by the subject. Um,
That's true. I guess what I'm asking though is, what does that mean?
oh, what does it mean?
Another way of looking at it, the way that the definitions work here is not that they're really, sorry, those dogs out there are loud and annoying.
Oh
Uh,
yeah. Yeah.
you hear my dog, or they're not my dogs, but you hear those dogs out there.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, okay. Um, so one way of asking it, not so much like what's the formal or logical definition of it, but rather, when you say something like S is not P, or S is non-P, or it is not the case that S is P or whatever, in what sort of situation would that be descriptive of a state of affairs? Right. And there are different sorts of situations that actually are apt for one of those constructions, but they mean something different. In other words, there are differences in the situations within which the different uses would be apt.
Hmm.
So you've got negation, privation, and then indefiniteness. So like an example, I think the example he chooses, I don't remember the author. Oh, Alexander of Aphrodisias. Alexander of Aphrodisias. Uh, you know what an aphrodisiac is?
Is that it's it's not what is it? I was gonna say trans person, but
Oh, no, 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 no. No, an
okay.
aphrodisiac is typically a food, though it could be a drug, I suppose, that
Hmm.
uh, makes a person want to engage in sexual intercourse.
I see. Viagra.
Well, yeah, Viagra would be an aphrodisiac, but other certain kinds of foods, some people say oysters or whatever, certain foods are aphrodisiac.
Oh, I see. Yes,
This
yes.
guy's name is Alexander of Aphrodisias. Aphrodisias. So I don't know. I don't. Anyway, his example of a negation is
Mm.
the wall does not see,
Hmm.
which would still be, S is not P or something like that, right? Um, but then his example of privation is the blind man does not see. And these are supposed to be different contexts that suggest different meanings of the same logical form, or perhaps it's not the same logical form.
Hmm.
In Latin, it's not going to be the same logical form, or at least not the same grammatical form. I suppose in Arabic, it will look the same,
Yeah.
but it means something different.
So does this have to do with like categorical like mistakes or anything? Um,
Um, it's sort of, I don't think it really does. I wonder if the indefinite one. I don't think that any of these are really clear examples of category mistakes. Um,
mhm.
I suppose that uh, maybe there could be other sentences other than the wall does not see that could be a category mistake. It's kind of ambiguous, right?
Hmm.
Category mistakes, by the way, are also fairly ambiguous with respect to their truth functionality, whether they're false or simply not true or false.
Yeah.
Like if I say the number five is yellow or something.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
one interpretation of that is that it's just false.
Hmm.
But another interpretation is that it's neither true nor false because there's some kind of syntactical failure with respect to subsuming the subject term under the predicate term,
Hmm.
or whatever you want to, apply the predicate to the subject or whatever. Um, so, yeah, I suppose you could interpret negation in terms of category mistakes, but
Hmm.
just keep in mind that category mistakes themselves are kind of ambiguous with respect to their truth function.
Okay.
Um, So like the wall does not see. I mean, the way that what's this guy's name? The author of this book,
Oh, Daniel Heller-Roazen.
yeah, Heller-Roazen talks about it really in terms of expectation, right?
Mm,
Like it's sort of interesting. One thing that you're saying when you do negation is that you're saying I don't expect that S would ever have P.
yeah.
But privation suggests that there is some expectation that S at least could have P or used to have P, um, or ought to have P,
Hmm.
right? And so that's where the blind man does not see. The negation is doing something different from the wall does not see, or maybe the number five is not yellow.
Right.
If I say like that banana is not yellow because it's
Hmm.
rotten,
Yeah.
black, um, it suggests that maybe one way of looking at it is sort of from the point of view of an enthymeme. You know what enthymemes are?
No.
Oh, this is something for you to read up on. In Aristotle's book, The Rhetoric, he explores uh, sort of like the rhetorical context within which logical utterances may be interpreted or may be employed. One way of looking at this is that when you analyze speech only in terms of its logical function, you don't actually get the full picture of meaning, right?
Yeah.
And so, a kind of related way of looking at it is, like if you think about pragmatism or Heidegger or whatever, this idea that we are already engaged in this huge network of behaviors, of copings, of assumptions, of values, of all this kind of stuff. And when you make a logical utterance, actually, all of that is typically assumed implicitly in a logical utterance. It's just that um, it's not clear because it's not part of the sentence,
Uh-huh.
right? So one way that so like if you look at natural reasoning versus formal reasoning, most of
Hmm.
the time when I convince you rationally of some belief or whatever, I don't do it in a formally coherent or formally strict way. In other words, I usually
Hmm.
leave a lot of necessary propositions out.
Yep.
Like for instance, if I say, I'm cold, so I'm going to turn off my fan, you'd think, yeah, that's rational. But actually, there are missing premises there. For instance,
Hmm.
the premise that turning off my fan will prevent me from being cold,
Hmm.
right? Or whatever. There are actually presumably possibly an infinite number of non-stated premises.
Yep.
This is also maybe kind of similar to what Quine has to say with respect to the web of belief,
Hmm.
right? So we talked about that a little bit, where you
Yeah.
can never falsify a hypothesis because any hypothesis exists within a web of all sorts of other beliefs or potentially practices or values or this kind of thing. And how
Yep.
can you be sure that what you're falsifying is the single logical sentence that is the hypothesis, when it may be the
Mm.
hypothesis plus any number of those other connected beliefs, right?
Right. Yeah.
So that's what enthymemes treat, that they're
Mm.
about that kind of thing. And you can look
Yeah.
at this chapter in a similar sort of way, that
Hmm.
even though the wall does not see and the blind man does not see look like they have the same logical form,
Yeah.
from the point of view of an enthymeme or a web of belief or something like this, they actually aren't the same kind of sentence,
Hmm.
right? Because in one sentence, what you're doing is presenting the denial of a property such that you are showing your further beliefs about the aptness of that property for the subject. In other words, if I say the wall does not see, the wall is not apt to see, is something that
Mm.
seems to already be assumed in that. Whereas if I say the blind man does not see, even though it's still a denial of that predicate, one sort of assumed premise there is the blind man is apt to see but doesn't see,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, that's interesting that in the written form, they're both similar. So is this like an ontological distinction by any chance?
I guess to the extent that it's a claim about the status of the subject,
Mm-hmm.
it's like it could be the ontological status of the subject if what we mean is its capacity to accept predicates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, then it would be an ontological claim if I'm saying the wall is not the sort of thing that can accept the predicate seeing, but a person, a human is.
Mm-hmm.
That's an ontological claim because I'm
Yeah.
talking about what type of being it has, perhaps. I think that there are other non-ontological ways to analyze it, uh, in terms of concepts or whatever. But in any case, that's the main distinction. But what it's getting at
Mm-hmm.
is this idea that any premise, any proposition, uh, always comes forward out of a background of unstated beliefs, activities, behaviors, values, this kind of thing,
Yeah.
assumptions, and so on. Yeah. So, that's
Mm-hmm.
the fairly clear distinction between negation and privation, which it just comes down to the aptness of the subject to accept the predicate that's being denied.
Yeah.
It's sort of like if here is maybe an interesting example. Seems like it's doing something a little bit different, and for that reason is not as clear as the wall does not see. But what's the difference
Mm-hmm.
between me saying Sandesh is late and Wednesday is late?
Mm.
In that case, I guess what's different is going to be modal. It's a modal difference, I suppose. It's necessarily impossible for Wednesday to be late because
Yeah.
just by the definition of days and hours and quantified time and so on, Wednesday can't be late. It doesn't
Mm-hmm.
make sense to say that Wednesday's late.
Yeah.
And I guess there's a question between whether, you know, is a tautological falsity something that's necessarily false, necessarily impossible? Um, is that different from it being a category mistake, or is it one type of category mistake? Like Wednesday isn't the type of thing that could be late.
Right.
Seems like a category mistake. But if you think about it, the category that I'm talking about is, I have a temporal subject and a temporal
Yeah.
predicate. And why is it that a temporal predicate can't be applied to a temporal subject? Seems like it's not a category mistake when you look at it that way. It seems like
Yeah.
it's just false by definition. Um, but then if I take another example of something that's false by definition, it doesn't seem like a category mistake at all. If I say 1 + 1 = 3,
Yeah, because
that
right.
doesn't seem like a category mistake. It just seems false.
Yep.
Um, you know, uh, so it seems like maybe there could be more divisions of this, right? With
Yeah.
respect to
Right.
category mistakes, with respect to necessary and contingent falsity. Um, anyway, he doesn't talk about that
Hmm.
here, but it could be something interesting to explore.
I
Uh,
guess when you're talking about like time differences, you can say Wednesday comes later. Let's say if you're thinking about Wednesday in India respect to Wednesday in the US, maybe you would make
yeah,
a
I see.
statement.
Yeah, I could tighten that sentence up a little bit to exclude that. but there are different interpretations of it, right? Because one thing we could say, Wednesday came late, or Wednesday is late. First of all, late here, what does it mean? It means it came after the expected time.
Mm-hmm.
So then it's not that different from the wall does not see, because one thing that is an unstated assumption is my expectation about when Wednesday will come. And that seems to be totally fine if I say I expect Wednesday to come at a certain time, but it doesn't. It would still be false, though, I guess, strictly to say that Wednesday is late, because really what it is I'm wrong about when Wednesday will come.
Mm-hmm.
And so my belief about it being late is just based on a prior false belief.
Yeah.
Um, However, expectation may play a role in that. However, one thing about that is that it can't be true. Yeah, so that's going to be something really important because Wednesday, so then if I say Wednesday is not late, then that's closer to the wall does not see.
Mm-hmm.
Of course, that also seems like it's necessarily true, whereas the wall does not see doesn't seem necessarily true because you can't get there from definitions. Um, in any case,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
um, I think we could spend a lot more time on that, but
Yeah.
get through more of this stuff. Um, because the third type of negative here is indefiniteness. And what I took from his historical analysis here is that a good definition for when to use indefiniteness or when to interpret a negation as an indefinite is that it's an absence, but there are no specific aptness conditions.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not clearly a name or a not name. So one way of looking at that is there are clear aptness conditions for negation. S doesn't have a property, but it shouldn't, there's no expectation that it would have that property. Privation, S doesn't have the property, but there is an expectation that it should. And
Yeah.
indefiniteness, there are no um, clear or stable aptness conditions for its use. I think
Yeah.
something like that. It's ambiguous whether they name anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
Aristotle says that saying non-P negates P, but also opens up an indefinite field of non-P predicates. But then the question is it naming those non-P predicates or is it just not naming anything?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Right. And those predicates can also be like not part of the species of the thing that's being negated, right? Like he says, like when I say non-man, it could be like a dog. The predicates could be dog or centaur, like imaginary things, and so on and so forth.
Yeah,
So it's
right, of the species. However, one example that he comes up with, which is sort of interesting, is if you say, I don't remember the exact name of the animal, but something like a blind mole rat or something like that, or a blind mole. If you say the
mhm,
blind mole does not see, that's true at the species level. But at the level of the genus moles, there are lots of moles that do see.
mhm,
But that seems like it would just be a privation. So the privation can be both at privation can be at the individual, the species, or the level of the genus, I think.
yeah.
Maybe it can be even higher than the genus, I guess. I'm not sure if that makes any sense. I probably not, because then you get things like non-being, which will yield paradoxes and that kind of thing.
Hmm.
Um, yeah. But the one important sort of formal distinction between an indefinite name and a negation or a privation is not just that it denies, but that it also affirms something. It also opens
Yeah.
up this infinite field of the complement to whatever term is being infinitized or you know negated internally to the term. By
Yeah,
internally to the term, I mean that you add a prefix to it, non-human
right.
or whatever. Um,
Hmm.
and then Boethius is, I guess, the one. You know about Boethius? Are you familiar with him? You know
No.
about Boethius. Boethius is really significant for the history of music and music theory.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, De Institutione Musica,
Mm,
book you might want to look up. It's sort of he's a sort of late Platonic thinker. I think he's from the 5th century or 6th century. I don't remember exactly. I think the 400s or so is when he lived. Do you have his dates? Did you Google him?
yeah, I just let's see. Died October 23rd, 524.
524. So he was probably born in the late 5th century. Yeah.
Yeah.
So he's sort of a late Platonic thinker, a late ancient thinker, early medieval thinker. And his ontology of music was fairly significant really until the 17th century.
Mm,
So, a lot of medieval theory and um, even Renaissance theory, to the extent that it builds on medieval theory, sort of takes his ontology of music with respect to ratios and the sort of formal structure of harmony and so on. A lot of that comes from
mm,
Boethius.
yeah, I see.
But in any case, he's the one who comes up with the term infinite for this kind of
Mm,
construction. And I guess there is something kind of interesting. Well, maybe let me think about this. I mean, the thing that's interesting about both indefinite and infinite is that they are autological.
mm,
You know what I mean by autological? The terms define something of which they themselves are examples,
mm.
right?
Yeah.
Which maybe is a kind of circularity. It'd be interesting
Yeah.
to explore that perspective. Is the term infinite name or indefinite name, is it a vicious circle? Is it a virtuous circle? That's also something to look up for yourself.
Mm,
Not all circular reasoning is taken to be a bad thing.
mm,
Um, it has to do with typically it's a bad thing if justification is circular, but even there, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Like if I say that A justifies B, which justifies C, which justifies A, it's not exactly clear why that's a problem
yeah.
because everything's justified,
Hmm.
right? But it does have that sort of infinite loop to it. Uh,
Hmm.
Typically, circular reasoning is taken to be vicious when it undermines itself.
Hmm.
And it's not really clear. It may depend on what we mean by justification, but it's not really clear that a name that names something of which it is an example, in other words, a name that names itself, is not
Hmm.
necessarily clear that that is self-undermining.
Yeah.
I think some people will claim that certain infinite names are going to be self-undermining, like an infinite transcendental, right? Like, so if I say non-being or non-thing, right? There are arguments for why that undermines itself. But it doesn't
Hmm.
follow from that that every non, or rather, that every infinite name is going to be self-undermining, including the infinite name, infinite, infinite name,
Hmm.
right? Um, but it's sort of interesting, and this gets back maybe a little bit to it's not so much an enthymeme, although it seems like it's kind of in that area. Um, but, if I say something like indefinite versus infinite, even though infinite, strictly speaking, is a non-P type of name, I often have the sense that the word infinite designates something positive and not just a lack of some boundary or a lack of some end or something like that. Even
Right.
that's what aoriston, which is the Greek indefinite is aoriston, which means like no horizon, non-horizon.
Uh, I see.
Aoriston is saying that there is no limit. That's also what
Hmm.
it literally means. And yet, for whatever reason, the way that we typically use the word infinity, I think we typically have this sense, or at least I have the sense, that it's positively denoting something and not just
Right.
negating the limit,
Yep.
you know. And I guess some corroborating evidence for that is like, with Georg Cantor and the different cardinalities of infinity or whatever, right? So that you can actually positively predicate certain things of infinity
Mm.
or of different types of infinity, different cardinalities of
Hmm.
infinity, etc., suggests that we can know positive things about infinity, which means that it's not just a non-S, it is an S,
Hmm. Hmm.
something like that. But
Yeah.
in any case, Boethius is the one who makes that transformation from indefinite to infinite,
Hmm.
because non-man, for instance, may denote an infinity of things, including
Right.
imaginary versus real, or potentially even impossible things,
Hmm.
right? So that this is one thing that a lot of people are dealing with, where everything that can be thought, even if it's impossible, it's still in some sense a thing. It has some kind of existence, right? And so if I say that a square circle is impossible, there's still something I'm talking about, a square circle,
Yeah.
right? Even though it's false by definition, I can't imagine it. Um, Nonetheless, that doesn't matter because I'm still talking about some kind of entity,
Yeah.
right? And so these sorts of infinite names can encompass even impossible things,
Right.
real, imaginary, impossible. So it's a very, wide-ranging type of term.
Hmm. Yeah. It seems like I don't know, just going back to intentionality and stuff, like
Hmm.
like the real, imaginary, and the impossible can all three be intentional, right?
Yeah.
Like a square circle it's still an intentional proposition, even though you're not able to imagine it.
Hmm.
You you can still think about it.
Yeah, that's true. Um, yeah. Yeah, that's true. I guess what that has to do with is there's a kind of asymmetry between real versus conceptual existence. Right.
Hmm.
First of all, if we want to use the word existence to mean things that um, have no non-conceptual existence, right? I suppose that um, one sort of shade of the asymmetry is that with real existence, those things can have non-conceptual existence, right? Like you don't
Hmm.
know anything about what's on my desk right now.
Yeah.
It still exists,
Hmm.
right? So yes, conceptual existence can pertain to things that really exist, things that are only imaginary, or things even that are impossible. Although there's also some question, about what we mean by intentionality, I suppose if we're using intentionality to be a property of language, so anything that comes after that in a that clause, then impossible things could have that kind of intentionality, but they can't really have the sort of phenomenal or
Hmm.
phenomenological intentionality that
Hmm.
perceptions or ideas have, right? Uh,
Yeah.
because it's impossible to imagine.
Yeah.
It's impossible to have an imagination or an awareness of the actual entity square circle.
Yeah.
However, you can sort of treat it linguistically as having intentionality because you can form sentences about square circles. Uh, and actually, that comes down to a distinction which is kind of interesting. I think in chapter 6, or is it? No, it's chapter 5 actually, where we are anyway in the outline.
Yeah.
It has to do with the Latin versus the Arabic traditions with respect to this question. So, like in the case of an impossible entity and intentionality, um,
Hmm.
there's a sense that if I say a term like square circle, it's no problem whatsoever to make sentences, grammatical sentences, with that term. However, it's not clear that those sentences have any meaning,
Hmm.
right? I mean, it's like that Chomsky sentence, right? Colorless green
Right.
sleep furiously is grammatical.
Yeah.
Is it true? Well, I don't think it's the sort of thing that can be true. Um, if it's not true, then on a specific understanding of meaning, it has no meaning. That is an analysis of meaning that differs from what Aristotle says, which is that all sentences have meaning, but they're not all truth functional.
Right. Statement making sentences. Right.
Well, a statement making sentence is a truth functional sentence, but
Yeah.
there are certain sentences that don't make statements.
Right.
Most people don't deny that there are classes of state or classes of sentences that are not declarative. They're not statements that nonetheless have meaning. Like, for instance, if I say, stop drinking water, you know what I mean,
Yeah.
or at least you know how to behave accordingly, depending on what your interests are, right?
Hmm.
Um, so then it has meaning if by meaning we simply mean um, uh, some kind of reasonable behavior under given
Hmm.
stances, but it doesn't have truth functionality because stop drinking water isn't true or false.
Yeah.
So most people will agree that there are sentences that uh, are not statements that nonetheless are meaningful. So it doesn't have to be true in order to be meaningful or even be truth functional. However, um, certain paradoxical sentences or self-contradictory sentences, there is a controversy over whether they're false or simply nonsensical, whether
Hmm.
they're false or neither true nor false.
Hmm.
And colorless green ideas sleep furiously is a sentence like that.
Yeah.
But the main point there is just to point up that grammar or syntax can accept certain constructions that logic can't. In other words, there's no way to know whether or not a sentence that is self-contradictory is true because it's not a logical sentence. Logic can't accept the semantic content of the sentence. However, the
Right.
grammatical form is totally fine,
Yeah.
right? And that's the main thing that is the distinction between the Arabic and the Latin traditions.
Hmm.
One thing that's interesting about the Latin tradition is that there seems to be at least among certain thinkers, a desire to quarantine these infinite names. They want to say it doesn't name anything, or
Right.
it's not a meaningful term or something like that. But something that's fairly clear is that it is grammatical.
Yeah.
S is non-P is grammatical in Latin.
Hmm.
And this is where they come down to the transposed sentences. You remember what the transposed sentences are?
It's those are the deflected um
But what's
sentences.
transposed in that? In a transposed sentence, what's transposed? There's exactly one part of the sentence that's transposed.
The predicate,
No, well,
right?
sort of, but not really. The predicate doesn't move. It has to do with the order of the words and the order of the predicate with respect to the negation.
Aha. Yeah, I remember. Oh, I see. Changes. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Now I remember actually remember the Latin, what was it? Omni est um, hominum or something like that. And then where what was it that was like transposed?
Well, yeah,
The
it's the
is, right?
negation.
The is.
Well, it's the
Yeah,
negation that moves around. The negation
yeah.
moves.
Right, right, right.
If you go back up to my table of the different forms of judgment or assertion or naming or whatever, you notice that the tilde, the negation there, can be
Mm-hmm.
applied to anything in the sense the S, the is, or the P.
Yeah.
So if I say whatever it is, omni, or see if I can find the sentence. I don't know if I wrote it down here. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, so in chapter 5 here, actually, we should just look at chapter 5 in the outline.
Mm-hmm.
Under Latin, it says omnes homo non est mortalis.
Mm-hmm.
Here, what we've got is that it's the copula that's being negated
Yes.
because it's saying not is. And if you just read S not is P, right? That's the way I've
Mm-hmm.
got it. But in omnis homo est non mortalis, the tilde comes after the is instead of
Yeah.
before it, right?
Right. Right.
And so what they're claiming is that there is a syntactical difference or a grammatical difference.
Mm-hmm.
But they want to, or at least certain people, people like Albertus Magnus. So I guess when I'm talking about the medievals here, really I'm talking about the scholastics in the 13th century. They want to say that yes, it's true that there's a change in the grammatical form. However, the infinite name doesn't really name anything. They're
Mm-hmm.
grammatical, but not logically meaningful. They don't refer to
Mm-hmm.
real substances with actual qualities. This is what Albert the Great says, Albertus Magnus. Albertus Magnus was, I think he was directly the teacher of Thomas Aquinas, or maybe there was somebody in between. No, I think he taught Thomas Aquinas. He was also a composer. So
Mm-hmm.
in the history of music, if you look at like your music history anthology, you might find one track by Albert the Great, Albertus Magnus.
I see.
It's like the medieval Puritan style or Leonin or
Mm-hmm.
that kind of stuff. But in any case, he wants to claim, and the scholastics want to claim that these infinite names, they are grammatical, but they don't really name anything. They don't name real substances with actual qualities.
Mm-hmm.
They're just sort of grammatical constructions. In the same way that saying the square circle has intentionality, one way that I can diffuse that if I don't want to admit self-contradictory entities, one thing I can say is, well, I mean, grammatically, you can form sentences about square circles, but the term square circle doesn't really pick anything out.
Hmm.
It's just a confused term. There's nothing to it.
Yeah. Right.
Formally, in grammar, it works, but it doesn't mean that the term itself is meaningful,
Hmm.
right? Um, so that's the approach that, in this book anyway, is taken to describe what's going on in the scholastic tradition, 13th century, mostly in France. That these infinite names are grammatical but not logical. But then
Yeah.
the Arabic tradition is sort of interesting because they are not grammatical, because Arabic does not use the copula.
Hmm. Yeah.
I haven't really looked very closely at this, and I sort of wonder if Arabic um, does have a word for the copula that's just not usually used, or if there really is no word for the copula.
I
Um,
I thought, yeah, I thought they in that chapter, one of the Arabic philosophers came up with like a substitute for the
well, they have
co
translations of certain terms,
yeah,
um, but
yeah.
but one thing that I do know about classical and also contemporary Arabic is that when you form a predicative sentence, you typically don't
Hmm.
have a word that functions as a copula. It's just assumed.
Uh-huh.
So like if I
Right.
say something like, whatever, Sandesh is a doctor.
Walking. Yeah.
Sandesh, you're a doctor. So Sandesh is a doctor.
Right.
I guess in Arabic, I could just say Sandesh doctor,
Right.
right? But what's important there is to know whether or not there is a word at all that just isn't used, or if there really is no word that could be used. Because in a lot of languages, like Romance languages, Italian, Spanish, or whatever, you typically don't have to have a subject in certain sentences.
Hmm.
Like if I want to say I am hungry in Italian,
Hmm.
I can just say ho fame, and there is no subject. It's just have hunger.
Ah.
But the reason that's possible is that the verb forms change depending on the pronoun. So if
Mm.
it's I or you or he or they, you're going to have a different form of the verb.
Oh, okay.
So that's why you don't need the subject. But you could also say io ho fame, which means I am hungry. But
Hmm.
you don't have to say the io, which means me, I.
I see.
And I wonder if Arabic is like that with respect to the copula, or is there really no word whatsoever that functions as a copula?
Hmm.
Um, the case is stronger
Mm.
if there really is no word at all.
Yeah.
But it's something that I would have to know more about classical Arabic and whatnot to say.
Yeah.
Um, but one thing that's interesting is that these Arabic authors are having a lot of trouble translating from Greek because Greek does use copulas.
Yeah.
And so they're trying to figure out what is the difference between S not is P and S is not P, since they don't have is in that sort of
Right.
function, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so for the Arabic authors, it's not grammatical, but then they decide that it is logical. But they don't have the sort of problem that the Latin authors have, because really what they do is simply say that S is non-P is privative. It's a privation.
Hmm.
Um, so S is not P, they say can be applied to both real and imaginary entities. But then they interpret uh, what Aristotle is going on about with these indefinite names as simply being a kind of privation, like the blind man does not see,
Hmm.
instead of it being an affirmation that there's this other domain of non whatever negative entities or negative properties or something like that.
Yeah.
So they don't really go full bore into affirming the logical status of
Hmm.
infinite names, because they say
Hmm.
that infinite names really just are um, privations.
Yeah.
Um, But what's interesting is that though it's not grammatical in Arabic, they do decide that it must have some specific meaning, I guess, because Aristotle goes on and on about it, or
Yeah.
mentions it at all. Whereas the
Hmm.
scholastics, it's sort of interesting because, you know, in Latin grammar, it is acceptable. And there's a very strong temptation when your language allows something grammatically. There's a strong temptation, I think, um, to assume that it's really picking something out, that it's really denoting something, right?
Hmm.
I mean, it's exactly like what we were talking about with the square circle. Uh,
Yeah.
First of all, it could be that the term square circle doesn't pick out anything. It's just a bunch of sounds like blah, 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 or something like that.
Yeah.
Like I could say,
Hmm.
my favorite shape is blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Um, but grammatically, since it works, right? It is a well-formed sentence grammatically. I think that we often have the temptation because of that to assume that it must have meaning,
Hmm.
right? And I think that's why the scholastics tend to be a little bit more worried about it
Yeah.
because language is doing something where most of the time language seems to be able to give us true, statements about reality, whatever. But sometimes language creates sentences where it's not at all clear that what it is describing could possibly exist or picks out anything at all, right?
Hmm.
Um, and so that's a little bit more of a trouble because then it undermines the authority of language because language itself can produce these things that if they are meaningful at all really undermine your picture of reality existence and so on, but it's
Right.
generated by language,
Yeah.
right?
Were they at this time, during the scholastics and stuff, were they thinking about like perfect forms, like in terms of like even like the human, right? Like a perfect human, like a perfect man and a perfect woman and stuff. And I'm just thinking about like square circle where they're both, geometrical figures, so they belong to the same category, but it creates this dissonance to think of it. But to think of like
Mm.
a man woman or like a woman man, at least now is like not that hard. It seems like as a culture we have transcended some of these impossibilities. Um, when
Well,
it comes to,
yeah, um, yeah. I mean, I suppose that that's something that I mean, you have a similar sort of problem with respect to Aristotle's biology versus Darwinian biology.
mm,
Because one thing that Aristotle claims is that species are fixed with respect to their categories. That is to say, like the definition of dog is a categorical definition that is fixed in this particular way. Now, whether or not it's perfect in some sort of sense of necessarily true or something like that, I'm not sure that Aristotle would really claim that. It is true that definitions, categorical definitions, um, uh, lay the correctness conditions for calling X entity a perfect version of its category.
mhm,
But those correctness conditions themselves, where do they come from? Right?
mhm,
There's a sense, perhaps, I don't know that he treats that. He might, but I don't know of a place that he treats the correctness conditions of these sorts of, say, biological categories as non-contingent. I think that there's his theory of fixed species really just suggests that for whatever species exists, whatever animal type exists or whatever, there are certain definitional characteristics um, that uh, will define whether it is a perfect or imperfect example of its species.
mhm.
Uh, and then the difference there with Darwinian biology is that species aren't fixed. The species constantly evolve, right?
Hmm.
So, um, it is a rejection of that sort of categorical thinking with respect to species. And so you could
Yeah.
think of gender in the same kind of way, that gender is really just a species. It's a subspecies of the species human.
Yeah.
There's animal, mammal, whatever, human, and then male,
Hmm.
female, right?
Hmm.
And I suppose that if you're going to take, oh, I don't know, sort of like an evolutionary account, you might want to say that, I don't know. I mean, it's a little bit different because usually when people are talking about overcoming gender categories, they're not really giving a historical account of like first, before there were mammals, there were single cell organisms and they were neither male or female. Nobody ever makes that argument.
Yeah.
Maybe we should, that's like part of our
Yeah.
history as polymorphic,
Yeah.
intergender types of beings that we derive from single cell organisms or something.
Yeah.
But that's not ever the case that people make. People make a different case, and it usually doesn't have so much to do with, I mean, it has a little bit to do with biology, but more than that, it has to do with social constructions of certain biological types. Um, let's pause for a second. I have to go to the bathroom, and I'll
Yeah.
be back in like
Oh, yeah.
a minute or two.
Okay. Yeah.
1 second. Let me just do this. You there, or did you step away? No. All right. I'll just hang out here.
Okay.
Hey. Uh, there's at least one other thing that I want to talk about before we leave today.
Yeah. I have like another 15 minutes or so.
Yeah, okay, let's move on to chapter 6.
Yeah.
So this is where he introduces the idea of transcendental terms. Um,
Hmm.
so one way of getting at the motivation for structuring the chapter this way, I think, is that he wants to talk about different ways of conceiving infinite terms,
Hmm.
right? And so, he talks a little bit about universals, and then he talks about transcendentals, and both universals and transcendentals um, either must, or in the case of transcendentals, they must be positive. In the case of universals, I guess
Hmm.
you could have negative universals, but they do have an affirmative species. And
Hmm.
so they both have this sort of positive infinity to them. Um, And that's going to be distinct from infinite names, which are by definition some kind of negation, right?
Right.
However, I suppose even there with infinite names, the logical construction is an affirmation of the negation.
Yep.
But he I think we could probably just skip over the universal part of it. Although it is maybe sort of important to look at what the difference is between, say, universal terms and transcendental terms. Universal terms, well, maybe I'll let you tackle that, although we don't have a lot of time, so try to go quickly.
Um, okay, so like substance is a universal term, right?
Wrong.
Would you say that? Oh,
Wrong.
that's a transcendental term? Okay.
I mean, that's not one of the ones that they name. I guess what the transcendental form of that would be something like being, which is a transcendental term.
Ah.
But substance, the reason it wouldn't be universal is the same reason that a term like being isn't universal but transcendental. Look at my outline,
Hmm.
chapter 6, infinite names,
Terms,
various types, universals, Porphyry's universals. So universals are terms that may be said of many things, but not all things.
okay, right.
So
Right. With substance, you can predicate it to like pretty much everything.
yeah,
If,
exactly. So
right.
you
Yeah.
think that you can have universal premises, right? So, or universal terms in premises, all dogs are mammals.
Hmm.
Um, what is the universal doing there? What's it being applied to, or what is it, what is it quantifying over is another way to look at it, right? It's quantifying over something specific, dogs. Or if I say
Yeah.
all mammals are animals, it's quantifying over something specific, mammals.
Right.
Universal terms function in that way. They do have this kind of completeness to them, but they're
Hmm.
complete within a restricted domain, right? There's got to be something specific that you can have a universal quantification over,
Yeah.
right? And that's different from transcendental terms. Transcendental terms are true of everything without limit.
Right.
Everything that exists has what these scholastics refer to as these transcendental terms. And the transcendental terms are things like being, one, true, good. Some of these are maybe kind of surprising, like good.
Yeah.
We don't have time, unfortunately, to
Yeah.
do the proof of why these terms are convertible. Convertible means that uh, they imply each other.
Hmm.
Every one of these terms implies the others, and they imply
Interesting.
the first term. So if x is if x has being, then x has goodness. If x is, then x is good. If x is, then x is true. If x is, then x is one.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
and if x is one, then x is, et cetera, right? So you can get from any of the properties, any of the transcendental terms to any of the other ones because they all imply
Hmm.
each other. That's what it means for
Yeah.
them to be convertible. I think
I
most of
see.
those are fairly easy to figure out. Like I think you could figure out how you can get from X is to X is true,
Yeah.
right? I mean, that's not hard to understand at all, that truth and existence seem to be closely related. The most complicated and most controversial one, I think, would be between being and goodness. As I said,
Mm,
we don't have time to flesh that out, although it's really
yeah.
fascinating. But if you can get there from the ontological argument for God's existence and the idea of perfection and necessary existence as entailed in the concept of perfection.
Right.
Anyway, the main thing, however, is that uh, transcendental terms have that sort of infinity. It's a positive infinity as opposed to the kind of negative infinity of infinite names, right?
Hmm.
Uh, but then there's sort of an interesting question that arises because it would seem that infinite names would have a larger cardinality maybe than transcendental names because those transcendental names, at least grammatically, can be infinitized, that you could have
Yeah,
non-being, you could have non-true, non-good.
yeah,
And these things, um, later on, Thomas Aquinas adds to the list thing and something, that of what exists, of all that exists, you can say that it is a thing,
yeah.
right? And in fact, that later on comes to be the most basic metaphysical level, or the most basic metaphysical category, thinghood or somethinghood.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah,
Now, what happens when you infinitize thing? Thing is a property that everything that exists has,
yeah.
thinghood.
Think good.
What happens when you then say, okay, so what is the domain of non-things?
So everything outside of thing, but if everything is a thing,
Yeah.
um, then it seems like it's sort of not I don't know how to say it, like
Well, it's
circular or
paradox. It's paradoxical,
yeah, right.
right? I mean, the easy non-formal way of understanding it is that all that exists has thinghood. We want to know whether or not, and that includes completely imaginary things,
Yep,
right? If I say it's an imaginary thing, well, I just said it was a thing. If I say
yep,
it's an impossible thing, it's a thing.
yep.
Um, so then that would suggest that non-things are also things. But now we have a
Mhm.
paradox. We have a violation of the law of non-contradiction, right?
Yeah.
Of X, if necessarily X is a thing, and if in the X position we put non-thing, then non-thing is a thing is a non-thing,
Yep.
right? So if you go down a little bit lower to where I don't know that I got this completely right. I have to check some of the details, but where it says proof, and you've got the axiom
Hmm.
and then the reductio, there are a couple
Yep.
axioms that are maybe not completely obvious just from our analysis of thing. So, first of all, thing means that to which true predications apply. So, if I say that circles are round, the thing is that aspect of circles that enable it to that enable me to truly apply a predicate to a circle. Its thinghood allows that. If it didn't have
Mm.
thinghood, I couldn't apply a predicate to it in a true way.
Yep.
Um, Now, the next one is the more controversial claim, or axiom even, which has to do with existential import. And
Mm.
that is the claim that any uh, for any true sentence, um, the subject must exist. In other words, the way I write it here is any true predicative statement presupposes the existence of its subject. So
Hmm.
if I say it's true that circles are round, then presupposed in that on this axiom is that circles exist. If circles didn't exist, then it couldn't be true to say circles are round,
Right.
right? Now, we've got a problem here if we say that um, if I've got a true sentence, then the subject that that sentence is about must exist. Otherwise, it couldn't be true.
Right.
Because here's what happens. If I say some obviously true sentence like every man is a thing, then I can convert that through contraposition to every non-thing is not a man.
Hmm.
How about contraposition, right?
Uh, well, in that case, you just applied negation, right? Is that what you're talking about?
Well, you have to switch the subject and predicate terms. Here's an easier way to understand. Do you know about modus tollens? Modustollens? If I have to spell it,
No.
I don't know about it. Modus tollens. Okay. Um, if I've got a conditional statement like P then Q, there are different ways to uh, get necessarily true conclusions from that premise. So let's say
Hmm.
my first premise is P, if P, then Q. Um, I'm not sure what you're doing now. Are you reading about modus tollens as I talk to you about it?
I just, yeah, I'm looking at an example and then
Okay,
comparing your
let's just do it.
logic.
Yeah, let's just do it in conversation. If I say
Yeah.
if P, then Q, what happens if my second premise is P? What's my conclusion going to be?
So if P then Q, and then you're saying your second premise is P,
P.
that's it.
Yeah, and then what can I conclude from that, from those two premises?
That,
Oh, it's too abstract. Maybe I'll do an easier example. If I say, if it's a dog, then it's a mammal.
Mhm.
Then I say, it is a dog. So what can I conclude?
That it is a mammal.
Yeah, that's a mammal. That's
Yeah.
called modus ponens. Here's
Okay.
modus tollens. Modus tollens goes the opposite way, where instead of affirming the first part, instead of affirming that it's true that dog or true that P, what I'm going to do is deny that Q. If I say,
Hmm.
if it's a dog, then it's a mammal, but it's not a mammal, what can I conclude from that?
It's not a dog.
Exactly. Yeah.
Right.
So in a conditional form, that's what contraposition is.
Mm.
Notice that what's going on is that if I say P then Q is equivalent to not Q then not P,
Mm.
right? Well, what's happened is
Yeah.
I've negated each term and I've switched them.
Right.
Right. So that's in a conditional. In asatoric sentence, it would go from something like all S is P to no no non-P is S or all non-P is non-S.
Hmm.
Right. So everything as a man is equivalent to every non-thing is not a man.
Yeah.
Right? Because if it's not a thing, how could it be a
Yeah.
man?
Right.
Right? Um, Now you got a problem if you are accepting axiom two, the principle of existential import, if a sentence that is true implies the existence of its subject term, then what you're saying is that non-things exist,
Hmm. Yeah.
right? Because it must be true. I mean, look, I guess we could deny that a thing is a man, but we don't, or rather, that a man is a thing. But we could make it even more general than that. We could put two um, transcendental terms in that sentence, right? And there you're going to have a biconditional because they imply each other. But if I say something like, whatever exists is a thing, then what I say is any non-thing is not an existent. But now I've
Yep.
got the same problem that I say, oh, but now I've got the sentence that's true. This non-thing must exist because it's a true sentence and that's the subject of that sentence,
Yeah.
right? And so
Hmm.
you can't get out of the problem. If you
Hmm.
have transcendental terms that imply each other, you're going to have this problem.
Yep.
Actually, he probably should have done that in this book instead of taking a contingent sentence like every man is a thing, because
Hmm.
that also implies unstated premises like, um, you know, men or humans or whatever exist and this kind of thing. But in any case, you can do it with transcendental terms. Now you've got this problem where a non-thing exists, but
Hmm.
whatever exists is a thing. Now,
Yeah.
not now you've either got a contradiction, a thing is a non-thing, It
Yeah.
violates the law of non-contradiction. Um, if you say that a non-thing is not a thing, then you're invalidating your second axiom. Uh, so none of these obviously true sentences can be true, even if what the obviously true sentences is something that only uses transcendentals, like anything that exists is a thing.
Hmm.
Because then any non-thing, if I take it that anything that exists is a thing, which by the way is implied already in the principle of existential import. It's not just that these transcendental terms imply each other, and then I add on this extra thing of existential import. Existential import, the definition of it is that anything that exists is a thing, and anything is
Thing.
something that exists. That's
Right.
there in the principle itself, right?
Yeah.
And so that's the principle of existential import is already um, presupposed in the theory of transcendental terms too,
Yep.
right? So then the problem is that if I allow transcendental terms to be turned made into infinite names, non-being, non-thing, this kind of thing, then I've got contradictions with respect to the statement, any non-thing is a thing, or I have contradiction with respect to the definition of transcendental terms and their mutual entailment.
Hmm.
So then what I have to do is say, oh, well, you know what? Even though it's a grammatical, well-formed sentence, it doesn't really mean anything.
Yeah.
I have to say that you cannot infinitize transcendental terms because the whole thing will
Hmm.
collapse.
Yeah. Right. So
The
this
conclusion,
the
sorry, yeah, I was just going to say the conclusion is that terms
Mhm.
that apply to everything, transcendentals, things like thing, something, being, etc., can't be meaningfully infinitized.
Mm.
Non-being, non-thing, and so on are either meaningless or they are going to be self-contradictory. They're going to destroy the transcendental terms themselves, right?
Mhm.
Yeah. What did you want to say?
Oh, no, no, no. I should go back to this chapter again because just reading this outline, and I feel like there's it seems a lot more richer now.
Yeah.
I was a little bored with this chapter, but I think this outline is like yeah, really
Just
helpful.
think of it here as given the assumptions of, scholastic metaphysics, bringing in
Hmm.
infinite names is kind of like dividing by zero.
Yeah.
It's going to destroy everything. And it's great because, it is one of these things where they don't really have a logical reason for denying the meaningfulness of infinite names. They have a
Hmm.
pragmatic reason.
Yeah.
Right. And it's kind of like the law of identity in Aristotle, right? Like um the law of identity or any axiom for that matter is not self-justifying. Any axiom, you can always look at its motivation or its justification to be pragmatic. In other words, it enables some consequence that I like.
Yeah.
Like, for instance, in the case of the law of identity, it's something like language or reference. I want to be able to have language. I want to be able to refer to things. So therefore, I need the law of identity. But if I say, you know what, I want a completely unbiased, disinterested defense for the law of identity, I can't do that because, first of all, any defense is always only going to be possible in language itself.
Hmm.
But secondly, I could always raise the question, why bother with language? Right? So it's not
Hmm.
going to be self-justifying. It's only justified with respect to what I want to get out of it.
Yeah.
And you can see uh, the um, the transcendental terms in scholastic metaphysics as functioning kind of the same way.
Hmm.
Why is it that we're not allowed to make transcendental terms into infinite names? Well, because then we won't be able to have our nice, beautiful metaphysics.
Yeah.
but that's not an unbiased reason. It's not like a self-justifying reason to leave out infinite names. It's just that
Hmm.
there's some consequence of our axioms that we like, and we don't want to lose that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Um,
All right.
yeah, we should maybe finish I mean, I don't know if you want to keep
Yeah,
with this
I want
book.
to get through the Kant chapters at least. So
Okay.
these chapters are fairly short and fairly digestible, so I feel like we could knock out the rest of the book in a meeting or two.
Yeah.
When do you want to reconvene?
Well, I mean, next week's good for me.
Okay. Same time?
Same time, ninth, I guess.
Okay. Okay, yeah, a little bit later. Sure. Yeah,
Oh,
17th
sorry, no,
or
yeah, yeah, yeah. July 9th is the
oh,
date.
July 9th. Okay. Oh, actually, I don't
Yeah,
think
yeah.
I can do it on that day because I'm doing a recording session. I could do it on the 10th, perhaps.
Okay. That's the Thursday. Yeah.
Tuesday, yeah. But what time? Do you want to do another 7:30? It's kind of brutal.
Yeah, this is a good. Oh,
Okay.
it is brutal.
Maybe, maybe we have more of an attention span when we just wake up and drink coffee.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, good.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. Sounds
See
good.
you
All
then.
right. See ya.
Bye.